On today's show, can the Minnesota Timberwolves survive the Karl Anthony-Towns meniscus injury? Optimism for his timetable to return to basketball action, and who steps up to replace Cat in the lineups and rotations for the Wolves? It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wondered what adventure could be waiting around the very next corner? Well, our friends over at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen right there at your fingertips. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next big adventure. Hey, maybe you want a little bit more space. The 2024 Nissan Pathfinder has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing capacity. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Wolves, Ben Beecken, who you can track down wherever you listen to your podcast and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Wolves. And Ben, a devastating blow for the Minnesota Timberwolves here, losing Karl Anthony-Towns for at least the remainder of the regular season with a left meniscus tear, undergoing what we're calling repair surgery, and will be reevaluated in about a month with, I guess, optimism that he can be back for the early Western Conference playoffs. Let's start right here. Is just, first off, you hate to see a player injured under any circumstances whatsoever, but just how much more devastating is this injury considering how good the Wolves have been this season and where they look like they're at as far as a team, and a team with legitimate, title hopes?
Yeah, I mean, the Wolves have had really good injury fortune all year long. And, I don't want to, every team has injury problems, right? But for Wolves fans, for people that don't follow the Wolves, this is just the perfect, like, the other shoes dropping now. Like, everybody was kind of waiting, because I don't think you need to be a Wolves fan to know the Wolves haven't won a playoff series since 2004. And that was the only season they've ever won a playoff series in the history of the franchise, going back to 1989. So this year, being number one in the West for the vast majority of the season, being one of the top 5 teams in the NBA all season long, and in the top spot, or having a share of the top spot, or being within a half game of the top spot, basically since Thanksgiving up until this Cat injury, late last week. That makes it really tough. I mean, Timberwolves fans have waited a long time. And of course, if they can hang on and still be a top 4 seed, they'll probably still be favored, especially if Cat comes back in a first round series. But they've now lost a couple in a row, and, we could talk about where they are in the standings now, but it's certainly like, because, I mean, yeah, if he does come back in a month, you got to reacclimate him. He's got to get back in shape. You got to hopefully win in the first round with or without Cat. So it's too bad. And you feel bad for Cat too, obviously, because he's hurt, but also because he's been, this is like year 8 with the Wolves. And he's been committed to being in Minnesota. He knows the journey that these Wolves fans have been on. That's mostly been negative over 30 plus seasons. And for him to not be able to be part of what could have been a 56, 58 win season, and I guess still could be, but it's going to be more challenging for him not to be a part of it down the stretch, is really tough for him too.
Yeah, it's brutal all around. And to your point about reacclimating, right? That's always so tough. You lose a player or trying to reintegrate a player this late into the season. This is when you want to be finalizing, playoff rotations and really kind of, honing in on who your go-to guys are going to be and what things are going to look like, and maybe just really ironing out all those little kinks before the postseason gets here. And then to throw a huge wrench into things like this. First off, I was just shocked that there was even optimism that he was going to make it back as soon as the month-long timetable to reevaluate him in 4 weeks. I thought a meniscus tear was going to hold him out for much longer than that.
Yeah, and the team's not being super clear about it. I guess that makes sense. But like, because there's all sorts of, I mean, you're right. There's all sorts of varying, I guess, solutions for whatever, or I guess varying severities of what a meniscus tear is, and then also different solutions to try and treat it or repair it or whatever. And it certainly seems like it's more the repair route, or, not a full repair, but some sort of a partial repair. Because they were saying the surgery was going to be early this week. So he was actually at the Wolves game in LA. My understanding is he hasn't had the surgery yet, but whatever it is, it's going to be a lot of rest and recuperation. I think that's mostly what it is, right? He undergoes the operation, he rests for 3 to 4 weeks, and then he gets back on the court, because like 4 weeks from now is the last week of the regular season. So if he's back on the court practicing that week, he's probably not playing in the first round of the playoffs, or at least not the start of that series. So yeah, and last year, I mean, Cat missed 60-ish games, or I think it was 57, 58 games with the calf injury, and they were good when he came back, and they were better with him than they were without him. But it took a minute for them to kind of figure out how to reintegrate him into the offense. Now, he and Rudy have had a whole season now, or 3/4 of a season to play together, whereas last year they'd played together for 20 games before Cat got hurt. So hopefully that period of time, if he just misses a month, won't take as long for the offense to get back rolling as it. I mean, not that it was ever really rolling this year. It's been pretty middle of the pack, but at least, back to where it was, right? And to get another high usage guy back into the rotation. So that's certainly going to be a challenge, the final, or I guess, because if he doesn't play till the playoffs, which seems very, very likely, you're talking about to do this on the fly against top flight competition, which isn't going to be easy.
Now, silver lining here for the Timberwolves is they've actually still been really good without Cat on the floor this season. They have a plus 7.38 net rating when he is on the court. They still have a very good positive net rating, plus 5.22 net rating when he's off the court this season. But I'm curious, how does this Timberwolves team change? How do they adjust lineups? Who steps into the starting role without Cat in the lineup? What are some of the sweeping changes that we should expect to see over these next few weeks to round out, I should say, the regular season, as Chris Finch kind of makes his adjustments, without Cat now in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, they actually won. Cat had missed 3 games previously this season. One with the sore knee earlier. He missed one for personal reasons, and I think there was one other game he missed. And they actually won their first 4 games going back to the Pacers game on Thursday without Cat on the floor at all. They have now dropped 2 straight. Their preferred lineup without Cat is to start Kyle Anderson at the 4, which is what they did last season when Cat was out, and then still bring Naz Reid off the bench to provide that, that scoring punch, because he's really their only other guy that can create his own offense with any regularity outside of Anthony Edwards, of course. So that's the preferred starting lineup. Sunday against the Lakers, they didn't have Kyle Anderson or Rudy Gobert, so that meant Naz Reid started for the first time this year, and they started to kill Alexander Walker. Jaden McDaniels played the 4, which he hasn't done at all since the Rudy Gobert trade. Like a handful of minutes here and there has he played the 4. The Wolves much prefer to play big with McDaniels at the 3. And Luka Garza played rotation minutes for the first time this year. He played non-garbage time minutes. So hopefully, Kyle Anderson, Rudy Gobert are both kind of day to day. So their preferred starting lineup with no Cat is to start slow-mo, gives you a little bit of that kind of creation for others that Cat does. He's obviously more of a distributor and a much lower usage. But then the Wolves, what they'll want to do is play a lot of spread pick and roll, do a lot of 2-man game with Ant and Rudy, or Mike Conley and Rudy with everybody else spotting up. But Kyle Anderson does not provide the spacing that Karl Anthony-Towns does. So it limits you a little bit there. And then if you have additional injuries, then it forces Naz into the starting lineup. And like the Wolves bench on Sunday against the Lakers had no punch because Naz was a starter and he had to play heavy minutes and was good. But it just, the Wolves have really good depth. But now you're asking guys, like, they signed TJ Warren to a 10-day contract on Thursday, and he's played heavy rotation minutes in close games each of the last 3 games. And this team still has decent depth, but they're really top heavy in terms of the guys who can score, right? It's Cat, it's Ant, and then Naz Reid would be your next guy who's going to get his own shot. Rudy relies on somebody else to help him get the basketball in proximity to the rim. So it's going to be a lot more Naz opportunities off the bench. It's going to be a lot more Anthony Edwards. And you're going to have better overall ball movement, which sometimes is tricky when you give Ant the ball and say, hey, go score because we need you. He sometimes gets tunnel vision, loves to play ISO ball. The ball gets sticky, and you don't get that ball movement that gets, open threes for to kill Alexander Walker and Jaden McDaniels and Mike Conley. And we saw a little bit of that against the Lakers on Sunday, and also in their loss on Friday night as well.
I'm glad you brought up the loss on Friday night. Last thing that I got for you here is, Rudy Gobert has in the past been very outspoken about his frustrations with officiating. That boiled over yet again in the loss Friday night to the Cavaliers. He was issued a technical foul in the closing seconds of regulation, and he did the money sign gesture over towards Scott Foster, and then doubled down on it in his post game interview. He was fined $100,000 for saying that he's going to bite the bullet, and he talked about that betting is hurting the game and it's becoming bigger and bigger, but that it shouldn't feel that way. Thoughts on Rudy Gobert and just his frustrations, kind of getting to a boiling point after that game?
Yeah. Part of I don't know, part of my reaction is like, yeah, go get him, Rudy. Like, because the Wolves, like it's such a tricky subject because every team's fans think they get screwed over by the refs. And I get that. That's part of being a fan. That's part of the NBA. It just is. But there has been kind of this long-standing, like, self-fulfilling prophecy with the Wolves where last year they led the league in technical fouls, and they haven't this year, although it's been ramping up lately. Last year they led the league, and it was a self-fulfilling prophecy on both sides where the Wolves always thought the refs were out to get them. So they were always complaining, and the refs said, well, you always complain, so we're not going to give you any calls. And it was just this vicious cycle. We've seen a little bit of that this year. And Ant got, said what he said that was caught by a hot mic. And then also publicly after the Wolves beat the Thunder this year, complaining about the refs. Last 2-minute report showing SGA grabbing Ant's or saying that wasn't a foul when he literally grabbed his form, like stuff like that. That really is, the Wolves, from like players, coaches, front office, everybody around the Wolves is like, okay, something here is a little bit off. Now for Rudy to do what he did, that obviously isn't great. It was terrible timing in the game because they were up 1 with 20 seconds left. They ended up losing in overtime in that game. The technical free throw, of course, tied the game. And to make matters worse, it was after he had committed his 6th foul and was disqualified. So the timing was awful. And then saying what he said publicly afterwards, I would say it's inadvisable, right? Like you don't want to say that. You don't want to say what he said. It's going to be really hard for him to maintain a positive relationship with refs when you straight up say like, hey, I think sports gambling and betting is influencing, the league. That's maybe going a bit too far to say that publicly. I don't think that was smart. We'll see what happens. I mean, I was kind of excited to see him on the floor against the Lakers, but he sat out with some hamstring soreness. So we'll see if he plays Tuesday against the Clippers, and we'll see if that changes anything for better or for worse for Rudy and for the Timberwolves. But it's not something you want. You don't want the refs, looking to, I'm not saying they are going to look to get payback, but you don't want that in the back of their minds as you're going into the playoffs. So I wish that Rudy hadn't gone about it the way he did. We'll just say that.
How will Karl Anthony-Towns go about his rehabilitation process, and what will the Wolves look like without Cat in the lineup to close out the regular season? You'll have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Wolves. Ben, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.